I want to introduce 2 new words to your vocabulary. So please join me. The first word is Sikona. Can you say it with me, please? Sikona. That word means I am here. The second word I want to introduce you to is Sawubona. Can you say it with me, please? Sawubona. Which literally means I see you. This is a greeting that comes from the Natal tribes in South Africa, and when they greet one another daily, they say, I am here to be seen, and the response is, I see you. And the meaning behind that is that until you see me, I do not exist. And when you see me, you bring me into existence. I love that greeting. It warms my heart because of all the conversations that I've been hearing and talking with you about around community. It's been such a privilege to join this community. I am new. You haven't seen me before, so hi. And I'm just so taken aback by the caring and the way you collaborate with one another and the way you celebrate your community. And so thanks for learning those 2 words with me. I really appreciate it. I am Jessica, in case that was unclear. I want to talk to you today a little bit about human factors and safety science, and what does that have to do with you, all wonderful people? Human factors is about what people do, where they do it, how they do it. And it's really all of those interactions, and the more we pull at that thread and pull it apart, we're going to see all the ways that this applies to you. I am working on a product at Microsoft that currently has about 85,000 engineers using it every day, whether that's to build and deploy their own software or to build and deploy this software using this software. That's a lot of people, and it's got me sort of verklempt with the number of humans that are really relying on this system to do their job. And basically, let's dig into that system. What is this system of soul and beast that de Maistre talks about? You know, he was cooking some toast one morning, and he was daydreaming. And while he was looking away, some burning log, fell on the tongs that he was using to do his toast. They didn't have toasters then. But basically, the tongs got very hot, and he burned himself. And this is how he illustrates this system of soul and beast. Basically, that everyday slips and lapses will happen while you're just being human, making toast. This talk is probably going to leave you with more questions than answers. So I just want to warn you about that. And I need you to think for yourself what this impact is for you after this talk. And I encourage you to talk with me about it, but I'm just a student, still studying, still learning about human factors, even though I've been studying it for 4 or 5 years now. Anybody ever see signs like this outside your workplace or driving into a construction site? We see signs that talk about safety. We see signs about how many days it has been since something went wrong. Keep safety in mind. It will save your behind, the signs tell us. What about what we wear when we go to work? If we put a hard hat on, those all things make sense, but what about the short sleeve shirts? If you have those on, are you safe? Safety begins with teamwork. Maybe you've seen those signs cheering you on to get on board, and safety starts with you. Do those things really make you feel safe? Do they tell us anything about the safety of the workplace that we're in? Those signs have nothing to do with safety. How many of you flew on an airplane to be here? Oh, it's about half of us. Nice. I spent a lot of time on planes. I was flipping through my phone over the last couple of days and, just look at pictures of the kids, just little things you do while you're on travel. And what I noticed is that I take a lot of pictures out of airplanes, and it was simultaneously beautiful to see all these sunsets and various things. But it was also kind of like, oh, wow, I really spend a lot of time on planes. And so that travel is, what's going on there is a lot more than just buying your flight and getting on the plane. It's a willingness to trust that the people you trust, that they're trusting the automation underneath it. There is a lot of software in planes. That willingness to put yourself at risk to get on a plane, to make all those decisions. There's a lot of dynamics involved. I tweeted this out a few weeks ago because it just hit me one day that a lot of people were complaining on travel in my feed. And I thought, what's going on here? And as I stopped to reflect on it, I really felt that complaining about travel it's not helpful, because when I really stopped to think about all the thousands of unseen hands that help me get to my destination, all of the faith and trust that they've placed in the tooling and automation to do that, to help me get where I need to go. So it just occurred to me, a lot of trust. And it particularly occurred to me because one day I was flying up to Redmond, and I snuggled into my seat, and I had my little travel pillow, and I was ready for a relaxing 2-hour flight to Seattle. I wake up about an hour into the flight, and I'm very confused because as I look around, everyone there in the plane is making these gasping sounds, which do not sound reassuring at all. And I have no idea what's going on because I've been sleeping. And everybody's leaning out the window to one side or the other, looking out, as best they can out the window. And I just asked the person next to me, what is going on? And she said, we are in an emergency landing right now. We have lost a hydraulic pump. We are going back to LA. I had internet access while this was going on and made the mistake of Googling, what is a hydraulic pump? I was on an Alaska Airlines flight, and the thing is that if you Google Alaska Airlines hydraulic pump, you'll discover that 15, 20 years ago, they lost a plane entirely, not just the pump. Like, that happened, and then the cascading failures of an error like that, or a mechanical failure like that, and that was really upsetting to read that while I was on the plane that was in this emergency situation, and it was terrifying. It was really terrifying. And I think what brings this trust in travel, and why I'll explain why that connects later, but is that I got back to LA, and then I had to make the choice to get on another plane to go back up there. I tried to go there, this happened, now I gotta get back on the plane. And you know what? I don't think anyone would have been upset with me if I said, that's it, I'm done, I'm not traveling anymore, because it was that scary. I did get on the plane. And when I got to my destination, it was a community event. And at that event were some DevOps engineers from Alaska Airlines who gave me a really big hug. And I guess this trust in them is about that. It is about knowing that they care about me, even though I don't really know them. All those decisions, all those unseen hands helping me get to where I need to go, just brought a lot of appreciation to the trust that we're placing in these systems. I have a friend who, on January 13th, was enjoying breakfast with her family, and she was celebrating, the wonderful times with her grandkids and her sons and their wives, and really enjoying a really nice brunch. And all of a sudden, their phones start to ring and make that sound that we hear when the Amber Alert goes off. And they all look at their phones, and they see this ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. And I asked her if she felt comfortable to tell me what that was like for her. And what she shared is that in that moment, she held her family close and told them that she loved them and that no matter what, it was going to be okay. And I just think, my goodness, how graceful is she? How would we respond in the face of this situation? I hope that I would be able to be as composed and loving as she was and be that sort of force for good for her family. But that's just one of thousands, hundreds of thousands of stories of people who truly believed that these were their last moments together, the last moments that they would have. We start to see some of the details come out of this incident. Some of the things I'm going to talk about, just leave them parked there in your mind, and then we'll look back at why they matter in a minute, but I'm just going to address a couple of things that happened during that process. From a drop-down menu, we see the two choices, and as everyone knows, he made the wrong choice. This was a standard procedure. How many times have we heard standard procedure? Doesn't that make you think like, oh, it's routine, like maybe there's a checklist we can follow? What is the standard procedure? And it happened during a changeover of shift, also a very confusing time. So we can pick apart all the things that went wrong, but that's not what I'm trying to do. I just want to bring your attention to them a little bit and spark a little conversation for you. This human error, this man who made this decision, who made this error, when we hear that word, I think it's really important for you to sort of attune yourself to that word, because when you hear it, I want you to stop and be really critical, think critically about what you're hearing and what's really happening when someone labels something human error. It's usually and always not usually, always, but a attribute and a symptom of much deeper causes. The person sort of like leading this investigation, or he was the manager of the guy, we heard that they had to double back and craft the false alarm message with the FAA. So to be clear, they had never thought that this would ever happen. Never thought about it. Just didn't occur to them. They didn't even have procedures to do that. We don't think things are going to go wrong. My 21-year-old son thinks that he's a great driver and that nothing else is going, he's never been in an accident, so he must be a great driver. And that's not a thing, right? what has happened in the past and the things that you think you've designed for, you can't know them all. You just can't. They never planned for this. It just never crossed their mind that this would occur. In the immediate aftermath of those very stressful 38 minutes, there was a lot of efforts to try to address the situation. We've heard that the supervisor guy was trying to log into Twitter on his phone and Facebook on his phone, but he didn't have his passwords. And so the point here is that, Twitter and Facebook became the things that they went to try to right this wrong and to make it correct. And that's why I say, all your systems, all your web apps and your messaging system and your WhatsApp and, they are becoming, maybe not today, but they are becoming safety critical systems. You may not know that what you're designing will ultimately be used in a way that you couldn't have planned for. All your systems are safety critical or on their way to becoming that. These guys should be a public utility. It's just terrifying to think that that is the mechanism that they went to. Or maybe it's revealing, I don't know. They're driving down the road and looking at this missile alert. They're trying to correct the information in every way they can. There's audio of hearing on the police dispatch, basically, the dialogue between the law enforcement on this audio is very telling. They're like, somebody's gonna get fired for this, somebody should be fired. And they're discussing basically the impact of this error and how that they were going to respond to it. Meanwhile, on Twitter, my favorite website, it's funny, right? We start to see these, hilarious things, right? And it's funny, like a little bit, but is it helpful? This guy is supposed to be a safety guy. If you look at his Twitter bio, he's like a safety guy. I expected much more from a safety guy. I really did. Maybe I'm wrong for doing that, but this over focus on the user experience and the choices and all of that, and isolating on that and nothing about all these other aspects of what went wrong here it's just wrong. There's so much more to it. And so this kind of stuff, it might be amusing for a second, but in this particular situation, this is not helpful. And then we've got Carl, super sat Carl. He's always going to show up and give us some helpful information. He is proposing that this is what the interface looked like. In case you're wondering, this is what it looked like. Comes with this sort of authority, right? I don't know if this is helpful. How is this helping us? There were at least 6 different images of proposed user or what different people believed it was. Some of them were coming from Hawaii themselves and stating, well, this isn't what the system really looks like, but it's a close enough representation. And I'm just saying that all of these things happening on Twitter and everything discussed, it's not helping us at all. Eric, my favorite. Epic design fail. Isn't that neat when we can wrap up what happened in Hawaii by just saying that? I don't think that these guys I think they should delete their accounts. Okay, a couple other things about Hawaii, about what happened. As the days progressed on and ultimately, I was very hopeful at the beginning because they were using the right words. They were saying, this is a complex system, there's so many factors. So the dialogue early on about this issue looked positive from a human factors perspective, but rapidly went into the blame and shame and fire the guy. And so this is just really to illustrate that there's two very opposing views. And when things go wrong, a lot of times you can sort of orient yourself to how someone views problems. This older view is one of running away from the problems, get away from the risk. Let's put some more, defenses in front of this error. Let's get away from it. And it focuses on the errors or the non-compliance of something. So we can see that in Hawaii, that's the view that people are taking. But ultimately, I think what I want to ask you is, when things go wrong like this, people have suffered. How do you move on in the face of suffering? How do you move from that into anything helpful or productive? We start to see things like the extended Swiss cheese model as explanations for these just combination of things that just on a Tuesday or a Saturday in this case lined up, and boy, that problem just happened. So we start to see these explanations, but this drive to explain what happened, there's a couple of things going on in that sort of need, right? How do we process this? And they are psychological, the drives for explanation. Epistemological asks us to explain what happened, the facts themselves, the finding, the causes, and the effects. Preventative, how can we stop this from ever happening again? Boy, that shouldn't happen again. Is there a moral need for explanation? Were they deviant? Did they make a mistake? Were they lapse? Were they just a bad apple? What's going on there? And then existential. It's really like, how do you explain suffering? What do you do with that outrage when there is no explanation that ever satisfies? Because we will never be satisfied. There will never be sort of something that makes all of that happen okay. Maybe it is the fact that it was okay and it wasn't real. Maybe that. But as we start to look at all of these things and what happened in Hawaii, I think it's important to remember a couple of things. One is that we don't find cause, we construct it. We make sense of the world out of every detail that we can find, and we construct that cause. But instead, I want to propose that you take a look at what could possibly have made that button choice make sense to him at the time. If you approach it from that question, you start to learn about something called local rationality, which is literally as simple as, why did it make sense for them to do it? That becomes important because
now fired from his job as a...
Sorry. We did that. That happened to me yesterday. Okay, hopefully it won't be too loud. Maybe they can dial it down. Let's see.
Now fired.
No. All right. It's okay. I'll try it again one more time, and then we're going to forget the video. Okay. Oh, it does? Do you see it? Oh, look at that. Great. Sorry about your ears.
Now fired from his job as a Hawaii State warning officer, the man responsible for sending the state into 38 minutes of chaos is speaking out. Facing death threats, he's requested anonymity.
I was 100% sure that it was the right decision, that it was real. I was convinced that it was real.
So, just now fired from his job as a Hawaii State...
He believed it was real. That's why he clicked the button. It wasn't because he was a bad guy, I don't think. I mean, I know they're trying to make it seem like he was a bad guy. Let's see. If I can get to the right slide here. Right, so he really believed that that was happening, and otherwise he would not have clicked it. So that's the thing about local rationality. And it comes from Sidney Decker's book, The Field Guide to Understanding Human Error. I have a very well-worn copy of this book that's all dog-eared and like underlined, and I can't loan it to any of you, but you should super order this book. I just think it's so prescient, and it sort of gave me a much deeper appreciation for human error, for these things that we call human error, and just the insights it gave. Again, you know, he was 100% convinced it was real. Later on in that audio, the person interviewing him asks the question, what would you do differently? What would you do differently if you could? And the response was, I don't think I would have done anything differently. I did what I was trained to do. Every day, people come to work to try to do a good job and do what they were trained to do and go home to their families. He believed it was real. He did what he was trained to do. We don't need to try to talk about what could have been different, because we hear this all the time. Stop me if you hear this. That shouldn't happen. Did you hear that one ever? That shouldn't happen. If only they had, then this wouldn't have happened. Human error. Root cause analysis. Somebody should like ring a cowbell or something every time we hear the word root cause analysis. When you hear these words, so attune yourself. Should have, wouldn't have, ought not to have done that, if only. Those should be an indication that someone is engaging in counterfactual thinking. These exhortations to do better next time. You shouldn't have done that. How come you couldn't see that button? You've made mistakes like this before. I feel like you shouldn't have done, this wouldn't have happened. Like, this can go on and on. The thing is that is not real. You're describing, when someone says that, they're describing an alternate reality that doesn't exist. And it serves no purpose to talk about what could have, should have happened. It's really not an effective form of conversation about this. It doesn't help. And the reason is that knowledge and error both flow from the same mental states. Remember, we all got up to go to work this morning and come to this conference, and some days we're better at our jobs than others, and some days things go wrong. But only success marks the difference between one and the other. But the actual thought process of doing this work and coming to work to do a good job, it's all coming from the same source, that same source of resilience that on a Tuesday saved something even worse from happening. But on a Thursday, he's a bad guy, right? Repeat after me. I've said this before. There is no root cause. Dr. Richard Cook says that root cause is fundamentally wrong. No isolation of a root cause of accident is possible. The evaluations based on such reasoning do not reflect a technical understanding of the nature of failure, but rather the social, cultural need to blame something specific for outcomes. When something does go wrong, we have another opportunity to look at it differently. If we could think through and read Sidney's guidance, we would find that this notion of a blame-free culture or a blameless postmortem would actually allow us to learn even more about what went wrong if we're willing to ask more about what went wrong. When we stop at the word root cause, when we stop at that and say, boy, we've got it nicked now, boy, we'll just fire that guy and this will never, ever, ever happen again. Who here believes that something like Hawaii is going to happen again? If we can look at this and think about and learn from other domains where are much higher consequence, life and death. We could systematize those lessons and share them with as many people as possible. And ultimately, this learning, sponsor vicarious learning for all. We want to move towards a culture of resilience, move away from the running from the errors. We want to run headlong into the errors. We want to run headlong into injecting failure and chaos into our systems so that we can prepare as best we're able to for the complexity of the software that we're building. We don't try to run away from things, we try to run toward them, but we try to get closer to a safe state. Question, is this a system? Is this the system? We've got an application tier, we've got a chat system, we've got a little supervisor, maybe it's running in Rust. We've got some message queues, we've got a web supervisor, a bunch of stuff going on. This is your system, right? No. Is this your system? WhatsApp? The WhatsApp architecture? Maybe this is the system. Maybe Microsoft can sell you a system. When we put these CI/CD pipelines and we create these tools, these are part of how we defend against failure. And it's really smart. There's a lot of talent in this room, all working to build systems that are reliable, that are resilient, that don't fail, that don't page you at 2 a.m. I've been thrilled hearing about the different types of work you're doing over this past couple days that I've gotten to know your community. You should keep doing that. Keep building defenses. We need them. Well-defended systems are successful a lot of times. Sometimes they're not, as we see. So those views of the system are very common. We have conferences dedicated to these systems. We have conferences dedicated to various technologies, DockerCon, KubeCon, ChefConf, all of these different conferences that we go to, all talking about the system. But something I learned last year out of a report called the Stella Report tells me that that wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to stop at those architectural drawings. We do those to help each other share information about how we've constructed this system. But this report really kind of blew up what I believed about software. All of those system tools that maps that I showed you, architecture diagrams I showed you, those are all what John Alsbaugh calls below the line. There's code monitoring tools, you've got deployment tools, you've got some version control in there, you have your databases, all of those things. So many things going on in that system. Again, whole conferences dedicated to it. But then I discovered this thing called above the line. Above the line is all of the things that you can't see. It's all of the unreachable code. That is all of the things that you think about how the system works. It's all of the things that you do to keep the systems running. It's all the planning and it's all the collaborating. It's all getting ready to run it. You're getting ready to add something to the load balancer. You're doing all of these things, and it's a lot of cognitive work. And your mental model about what you're building below the line is different than Casey's, necessarily. I want to bring the two lines together, or these above the line and below the line together, and I'll probably not do this justice, but that green line in between the systems and the code, and the above the line where all your mental cognitive engineering is happening, it's just a computer screen in between you. It might be your phone, but that line is what separates these systems that we are all creating. And that line is what separates And what you're trying to convey through this is your understanding of the model. Again, it's clicking, it's signals, it's the goals that you have. All of these things influence what you believe is the model for the system. And so Dr. Cook says very compellingly, the system is also you. It's all of those things that you're doing when you're working on them. Does anyone know who this person is? You know who this is, don't you? Yeah. When I talked about all those defenses in depth that we create and all of the things you're architecting to build, I want to tell you about a guy called Abraham Wald, who was a very smart physicist who was brought in to look at the planes that were coming back and figure out how to reinforce them. And, you know, he goes off and he's doing his work and is doing his research. And he comes back and he's like, you need to put the armor where the bullet holes are not, because those planes didn't come back. Where are you going to put the armor on your systems? You don't know. You've tried to know how things fail. You have this expertise, but the fact is you don't. You don't know what's going to happen on a Tuesday. None of us do. I just thought it was so brilliant the way he sort of was like, you know what? It just was a profound misunderstanding of how you protect assets, resources, humans, planes. So just food for thought about where your armor is going to go in your systems next. I asked you a question in the abstract. What is your safety culture? What does that mean to you? What does that even mean? Is that a thing, or is that just a really, have you heard safety culture? It was a question that was posed to us in a program I was at in January, and I really liked this question. What is culture? What is safety culture? And I took these notes. It's artifacts, it's beliefs, and it's assumptions. Artifacts can be your documentation. It can be the checklist that you provide. Like when you get on a plane, guess what? The pilot has a checklist that says, fly the plane. Why do we do checklists? It's a memory aid. It helps us address the cognitive limitations of humans. So don't forget to fly the plane, okay? Like when things go wrong and times are stressful and there's fatigue and it's an emergency, that's when things can get really it can be really important to use things like a checklist. Artifacts, beliefs, and assumptions. I want to tell you really quickly about I was reading this book about meetings of all things, and in this book they were describing how they had brought together this cross-section of the company, and they asked, it was executives plus the frontline workers, and they basically had created this opportunity for a very rich discussion about, safety. And it was during that meeting with the executives that an hourly worker noticed there is a button that if somebody knocks that, bumps it or something, that's going to take the whole thing down, the whole thing. This is an example of, this notion of the sharp end. Your people who are working with the sharp end of systems where things go wrong, that is also where things go right if you have the right relationship with people. And in this case, he went out and they bought some shielding and duct taped some stuff together. And it was only because they had created that safe, psychological safety to where a person could feel safe enough to describe a risk. Because describing risks is risky. Nobody wants to hear that there's this big looming expensive problem that's going to be very, very bad. We have to make it safe. I'm going to quote Bethany Macri. I'm sure I'm saying her name incorrectly. But safety requires prevention. Prevention requires honesty, and honesty requires the absence of fear. When you go back to work on Monday, are you going to say, well, this culture, I don't know what it is. That's above my pay grade. Or are you going to say, no, this culture is within me, it's within you, and we create it together in our interactions? That's what this is asking us to do, is to understand that we are the culture. It's not some nebulous thing out there. You can create it. I'm going to begin to close our time here with a couple closing thoughts. Safety is a characteristic of systems and their components. It's an emergent thing. It doesn't come when you buy the safety system from Costco. It doesn't come when you buy the very expensive safety consulting thing. It doesn't reside in a person or in a manual or in a rule book. It doesn't reside in a checklist. It happens organically, and it emerges after these complex interactions. The software that you're building is safety critical. Embedded devices, medical devices, pacemakers, software is everywhere. And it is becoming safety critical. As I mentioned, people continuously create safety. This happens because of the adaptations and skill and unique expertise. That is how safety is created. Ultimately, the biggest risk in technology is not that they won't buy our app, or that our company won't get funded, or that we won't go public, or that nobody uses our software. The biggest risk is that the software that you're building could hurt people in real and profound ways. Thank you.
Any questions?
Hi.
Hi. I don't recall if you mentioned this, but I think this sort of illustrates your point about root causes being a bit of a distraction. I think in the Hawaii incident, the supervisor himself pretended to be the U.S. Pacific Command. It also explicitly said the words, "This is not a drill," in his message.
And the question is?
Just sort of a comment, and
Yeah.
mentioning, I think that sort of highlights
The root cause.
the root causes there.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. You know, there's so many things more about what happened in Hawaii that I didn't get into, and you'll discover those as you start to look. But it absolutely is, because all of those things, those were newspaper clippings. The media has such a huge role to play in yours being willing to critically examine who's telling you what facts about things that go wrong. We don't know what was said on that or not. They've released a redacted transcript, but it's heavily redacted and does not cover the entire audio that this guy heard. But you're absolutely right. There's so much going on there. Who knows? That supervisor, he had said a lot of different things over the course of a few days. There's more to unpack there for sure.
So, a quick question is that a lot of us, when writing applications, will try to tell ourselves that it's not going to be safety critical. It's just a small thing. We hope it's not going to be running for 15 years after we've left and stuff like that. Or that there are organizational pressures that are about shipping fast instead of shipping high quality. And it's kind of comforting to just absolve ourselves of that responsibility
I mean, I'm a huge proponent of open source software. I think, making software open source is along the path for me when I think about how to make things safe, because, we saw in the VW scandal that, society's ability to regulate effectively ultimately depends on our being able to inspect and see the source code. And yeah, you're writing a piece of software and you think, oh, this is just one little thing. Nobody's ever going to use this in production. This is just, let me just hack this system together, just put it together, just proof of concept, right? We use that word a lot. We do not know how other people will use our software. We designed it in the ways that we thought of. But then once you create that and it's out in the world, this fully illustrates the difference between work as imagined, like you imagined it was going to work this way, and then Joe shows you that, boy, you did not know how he was going to use this. And so it just has to be part of your conversations. It has to be safe to talk about this. Okay, don't leave this stuff undiscussable. Make it discussable. Run screaming when you find out that these things are not discussable at your company. You do not want to work at a place where you cannot talk about when things are going to go wrong. Try to see if there's anything that you can do to influence those conversations. And again, just ask a lot more questions. Hey, what'd you think about that thing in Hawaii? See what your colleagues think of it. Talk about it so you can make sense of the world together and how you're going to go forward knowing that this kind of thing happens.
One of the two authors of Airline Programming published by Riley caused a GPRS nationwide outage. We've never disclosed which of the two authors it was, but I think you can probably guess. The other author sitting right here, right? He's an academic.
Thank you so much.